Nintendo have a lot of second-party companies that have made some highly regarded classics for the company over the years. We have Game Freak of Pokemon fame, Camelot Software of Mario sports titles and Golden Sun fame, Intelligent Systems of Fire Emblem fame, Skip Limited of Chibi Robo fame, and many more. But there's one company that was the first to work very close with Nintendo, even during the Famicom years. That would be HAL Laboratory. I could make a history video of the company and even about Satoru Iwata, but the gaming historian already made a video about Iwata which includes a bit of history of HAL, which I recommend checking out. But long story short, they originally made games for home computers like the MSX before getting their break working for Nintendo, and the rest is history. You see, there's a reason for this video's existence. I'm doing the Kirby marathon via Poppy, where I review all the games from the series. Well, maybe apart from the 3DS games in the moment. But when it came to Kirby's Pinball Land, I discovered Revenge of the Gator. Then I discovered that HAL did many pinball games in the past. So why not take a look at them all? There's only 6 games and you might find some pinball games that you might not have known about, especially from the home of Kirby. The first game I'll talk about is Pinball Spectacular for the Commodore 64 and VIC-20, released in 1983. This game was a tough bastard to get working. I managed to find an emulator and a good ROM that would actually function properly. We have a single screen in which the game is less pinball and more breakout as the flippers are paddles, 2 of them to be exact, which you move left and right. To get points, you can remove blocks. There's the word Commodore on the screen, hitting the corresponding letters on the board will light up the letters, and much more. I feel that the mixture of pinball and breakout is due to the limitations of a Commodore 64, or the VIC-20 now that I think about it. The game design is forgiving considering it's a game from 1983. It looks simple enough for the time, but it doesn't look much like a pinball game. But it's called Pinball Spectacular, so whatever. One year after the release of Pinball Spectacular, HAL released their next game, Rollerball, released in 1984 for the MSX. This game now closely resembles pinball the way it's supposed to be. Rollerball has one table separated into 4 screens, starting from the top, then the first middle, then the bottom, but you need to go to the bottom to try and access the second middle part. As expected, there are bumpers, obstacles and knobs. The gameplay is pretty good, the physics are decent for the system it was on. I feel it still holds up as a competent pinball game, but there'll be better pinball games on the way. Oh, and Satoru Iwata was the producer for this game, and this experience would help him with the next game. Nintendo's Pinball, developed and published by Nintendo, it was released for the Famicom and the arcades in 1984, but was eventually released in 1985 for the NES as part of the NES launch in the US, and in 1986 in Europe. But you're probably saying, hang on, this is a pinball game made by Nintendo, not HAL. Well, there is a reason I added this to the list anyway. Satoru Iwata was helping develop games for the Famicom, and Nintendo was impressed with his programming skills that they asked him to help with their pinball game since they were struggling with it and was falling behind schedule. Iwata got to work and pretty much repaired it. Since Iwata had his hands on it, it stays. It's another pinball game where you just get one table split into 2 screens. When the ball goes up, it goes to the top screen. The top screen looks like a basic pinball game, but the bottom screen is far too cramped with stuff. You're somehow more likely to fall out. I mean, why is this set of cards and bumpers smooshed together? If there's one thing I don't like about video pinball games are cramped tables. The pinball physics aren't that bad, it's a little floaty but doesn't break the gameplay. It has jingles but it has no music. I wish I had some music or at least some more jingles. This game also has a secondary mode should you go into a bonus hole at the bottom screen. You play a breakout-like mode in which Mario holds a platform to hit the ball to break blocks to earn points. Hitting blocks under Pauline will make her drop. Catch her and you get bonus points. Let her drop and you lose, probably breaking her legs. Nintendo's pinball is pretty good, but of course it gives little value should you buy the game, say a tenner. 5 or under is a good price, but nevertheless it's okay, a product of its time. The level design could have been more bright and colourful, but I don't expect anything from a launch title release at the time. At least it offers a bonus mode, but it's still god awful due to it being once again cramped and you're unable to know where it's going to land on your platform. If you just want some basic pinball, looks like Nintendo have got you covered. though I do prefer Rollerball on the MSX, it's not as cramped. Speaking of Rollerball, it's time to go back to that game, this time on the NES. Released in 1988 in Japan and in 1990 in the US. It was released in Australia, but I have no idea when it came out there. There's no info on that front. This is yet another one-table pinball game, more or less a remake of the MSX original. The table is once again split into 4 screens, with the top screen being the bonus screen. The theme of the table is New York. The main screen represents the Empire State Building, the next screen below represents the Statue of Liberty, and the bottom screen represents the bottom of the sea. Rollerball is yet another standard pinball game, but much more refined compared to the MSX original. Everything you'd expect a pinball game to have is here and accounted for. The table isn't cluttered, so both games have that plus in my book. Obstacles are quite fun to traverse through and the physics are great. Not too heavy, not too light, something just right. I feel that having one table feels a bit cheap. Add to the fact that it has that feeling of once you're done with the table, there isn't much to do with the game anymore. That being, the game can get repetitive very quickly. I'll give earlier games a pass on that because of limitations, but this was 1988, it needed a bit more. The graphics are pretty good, the level design sure has a lot of style to it. The New York theme fits very well since pinball to me feels like an American thing, though thank goodness the World Trade Center wasn't represented, otherwise every time I get a break in this game I constantly pull my collar. Speaking of Americanization, the game has one 2-player mode called Match Mode, where you got to try and get as much points as possible whilst trying not to lose as much points. The player loses when their points are gone. Both players are represented by 2 animals, one is the elephant and the other is supposed to be a giraffe, but the US version replaces the giraffe with a donkey. The addition of a donkey alongside the elephant is supposed to represent the American political parties, with the elephant representing Republican and the donkey representing Democrats. If I make a Trump joke, I'll be called a libtard, and if I don't, I'll be called a Nazi and or Uncle Tom. So no matter what I do, I will never win. Wait a minute, why should I give a shit? I'm British!
You claim to be a player, but I fucked your wife. We bust on bad boys, niggas fuck for life.
All in all, Rollerball for the NES is a fun pinball game, simple enough to pick up and play nowadays even with its minor issues. I recommend trying to find this one cheap because paying over £10 for it? Nah, it's not worth that price of admission. Now on to the last 2 games, and we leave the consoles and go onward to the popular handheld system that is, the Game Boy. The Game Boy would be perfect for pick up and play games, and when it comes to pinball games, well, that was a no-brainer. But funny how the most popular pinball games for the system were made by HAL. First off is Revenge of the Gator, known in Japan as Pinball 66 Hiki no Wani Daikoshin, translated to Pinball the Great 66 Alligator Parade, was released in 1989 in Japan and in 1990 elsewhere. For this game, the table's theme is alligators, with 4 screens, 3 bonus screens, and what I feel is a cluttered mess. Okay, not as cluttered, but I'll explain in the next game. But playing the game anyway, it's not bad. Bopping all around the table is pretty much standard. Trying to get that high score is all the more exhilarating. The physics aren't too bad, but is it just me, or the table at the bottom makes it easy to lose your ball to the alligator below? Or maybe I suck at this rather simple pinball game, who knows. The graphics are cartoony, I feel that it works very well for the Game Boy, but you're not missing much. I feel you could replace alligators with, well, any other animal. The music is repetitive, the gameplay is decent enough. I'd rather play Rollerball than this any day of the week, but it's not a bad pinball game all things considered.
Kirbyのピンボール舞台はゲームボーイ敵やアイテム連れてブブブランドでピンボールゲームボーイで大暴れカービィのピンボール
今度のカービィはピンボールランドで大暴れ本物顔負けのプレーが楽しめるゲームボーイソフトカービィのピンボール
転がり出したら止まらない
So, later in the show, we're going to be meeting someone vaguely interesting, but first, here's a big fat balloon-like creature. The kids think he's great, but I have never heard of him. Kirby! So, Kirby, you become a big star because of this.
The fabulous multi-level platform game based on your life, Kirby's Dream Land from Nintendo. But now there's a brand new game, Kirby's Pinball Land on Game Boy.
So, Kirby, is it true that if you don't like someone, you swallow them, spit them out, and destroy them? This is pot of lunch, Mr. Kirby. You vast pink globule.
The Kirby series, introducing Inflatable Nintendo.
And now onto the feature presentation, Kirby's Pinball Land, released in 1993 worldwide. The game is now worth the price of admission with 3 tables, each with 3 floors, Wispy Woods, Krakow and Poppy Bros Sr. The first time I played this a while back, I hated it for some reason, and playing it now, I can see why. The element of level progression takes higher priority over high score pinballing. Trying to do objectives with pinball is something I don't like, because the aim of the game is to fight the bosses in their respective tables, which unlocks a final table to battle King DDD. I hate that in pinball. Level progression in pinball, especially video pinball, is my huge gaming pet peeve, and Kirby's Pinball Land is an example of that. Also, the tables can feel cramped. The design of these tables are awful. Yeah, I can beat this boss. Oh, you dropped down, now you have to progress all the way back to the top to try again. Getting to the boss felt like I got lucky, which sums up pinball to me. It's all based on luck and maybe a little bit of skill. With real pinball, I believe skill is required, but with video pinball, well, that depends on how good the physics are, and this game has decent physics for what it is, but it's near enough ruined by everything else. I cannot recommend Kirby's Pinball Land. Whilst the game has more tables and more content, I feel that's also its weak point. It tries to be an adventurous game like the main series, but trying to smoosh it into a pinball game, which I feel doesn't work. When Rollerball for the NES can be much fulfilling than this Game Boy game, then it ultimately goes to show that when it comes to Rollerball, less is more. And putting objectives the same way you do in an adventure game doesn't work in pinball. And that was the last pinball game HAL produced as far as I'm aware. We had some good ones like the Rollerball games, and that's about it. I felt that HAL only got good with the MSX and NES renditions, and everything else is either wrong or just don't hold up or weren't good to begin with. But at least it gives you a trip to the past when HAL would produce just about anything in an experimental light. Nowadays it's either Kirby or Super Smash Bros. I'm back again with Kirby, and the last time I took a look at the series, I reviewed a pretty crap pinball game, along with some other HAL pinball oddities. But I'm not done with the spin-offs, as we have a rather experimental golf game starring the softest boy. But not exactly yet. Yep, just like the pinball episode, I'm once again going to take a look at HAL's backlog of the same genre, and we have another chunk of content. In terms of golf as a sport, I have no interest in watching any of it, but I have fun playing golf games, especially the Tiger Woods games, so at least I'll have some fun playing a sports game despite being terrible at them. But please keep in mind that I'm mostly a casual player of golf games. What I like and dislike about a golf game is my opinion. You may think I'm wrong, that I didn't like a particular feature, or I don't like the feel of this game, because if you came here to get an analysis on how this game is as realistic as real golf, then you've come to the wrong place. Just to get out of the way is all. Anyway, we start with Hole-in-One, released in 1984 for the MSX. The aim of the game is to swing a ball all the way to a hole, but the skill of it all is that the less swings you make get into the hole, the better the score. In fact, a lower score is actually a good thing. Now that I've summarized golf in general, it's exactly this game. You have a power bar and a swing bar. The power bar indicates how hard you swing, and the swing bar indicates the direction you're going to swing to. You have over multiple holes, and the game has 3 difficulty settings: Novice, Expert and Pro, which alters your speed with the power and swing bar. And, well, I just summed up the entire Hole-in-One series, but each of them have some differences. In terms of gameplay, the simplicity works well for the MSX, but the skill comes from trying to swing it to a rather safe area, and making sure that you're aware of the wind direction as well as the speed of the wind, meaning you have to change the way you swing to take advantage of the wind, or just ignore it and just wing it, which doesn't always work to your advantage. The graphics are really good for the MSX, with a nice simple HUD if you know how golf works, and the picture below shows a pixelated female as the game's avatar. There's only an intro song, and that's all the music you're going to get, along with sound effects.
ファミリーコンピュータのスポーツコレクション。 スタジアムの熱狂そのままにベースボール。多彩なテクニックで楽しむテニス。18ホールに挑戦するゴルフ。グラウンドいっぱいの熱戦サッカー。1人でも2人でも楽しめるファミリーコンピュータスポーツコレクション。
Next up is Golf. Developed and published by Nintendo, it was released in 1984 in Japan, 1985 in the US, and 1986 in Europe. Again, this is a Nintendo game, not a HAL game, but again, Satoru Iwata programmed it, and yet again, it stays. This game is credited as being the first golf game to have a power/accuracy bar. Hole-in-One had 2 bars, one for power and one for accuracy, and you know what? I kind of prefer Hole-in-One's bars. They're simple, easy to understand, and I don't like Nintendo Golf's HUD. It's all confusing and I don't like the physics. Heck, if the ball lands on a pixel of a tree, it counts as being out of bounds, but if it lands on a pixel of a tree in another course, it's alright. It feels more dated than the MSX game. The graphics are dull, the gameplay feels a bit finicky, it's just not as fun as the proper HAL Golf game. Fun fact about the character, some people assumed that the golfer is Mario, but according to Captain Rainbow, he is in fact Osan, which was one of the suggested original names for him during the development of Donkey Kong. But if there's one very positive thing I can say about the game is that it was once on your Switch, hidden inside the system, and could only be accessed on the anniversary of Iwata's death, a cultural thing it seems. It's been removed however, probably because people hacked the system to play at any time. I mean, it was a nice gesture, but most people don't give a shit. We're all sons of bitches in this realm. Going back to the MSX, the next game is Hole-in-One Professional, released a year later in 1985. Oh, and Iwata programmed this one. I'm not sure if he was involved in the first game, but whatever, it's still a HAL game. We have new courses and rather similar gameplay, as well as multiplayer with up to 4 players, a match mode where you can play against a computer, a tournament mode, and a construction mode where you can make your own golf courses. But I couldn't understand the controls and whatnot to make one for myself, but whatever. The gameplay is similar to the original, and that's all I got to say for this, so let's move on. The final MSX game is Hole-in-One Special, released for the MSX2 in 1987. Yet another standard 18-hole golf game, but this time with much better graphics thanks to the fact that, well, it's on the MSX2. Once again you have stroke, match and tournament play, but construction mode has been removed. Anyone miss it? I don't know, but the gameplay has been tweaked to be more realistic, though there are some issues, like trying to swing when you're in a specific area and you literally cannot get the ball out of there, making you use a specific club like the one where you swing it up and it quickly goes down. Yeah, that club. Very helpful in previous games, and in this one, now very sensitive in this game. Please keep in mind that whilst I like golf games, I don't understand the terminologies of some aspects of it. Out of all the games so far, I do like the original Hole-in-One. I like the simplicity even if it's dated by today's standards. I still had a lot of fun with it. Not to say the other games are bad, it's just based off preference. But Special is a great improvement thanks to the more realistic gameplay compared to the originals, as well as the better graphics. And yet we still don't get much music. Returning to the Famicom, we have Jumbo Ozaki no Hole-in-One Professional, released in 1988 in Japan only. I don't know who Masashi Ozaki is, but what I know is that he's a legendary player of golf in his home country of Japan, playing golf professionally from 1973 to 2002, winning 94 times in the Japan Golf Tour, and apparently still plays golf to this day in his 70s. And if you're a champ in a particular sport with a sellable name back then, chances are you're going to have your name on a video game, and this is no different. The game has everything Hole-in-One Special had in terms of features, but it's all about the gameplay here, and I don't particularly like this one. To start off, the developers replaced the easy to understand power/accuracy bar with Jumbo here swinging the club to indicate the swinging, and it ended up being confusing because there's no scale or any way to tell you how powerful or accurate your swing is going to be. I got used to it a little, but it still felt jarring. If it had a bar to get a good point when to stop and start swinging, or how golf game terminology works, I may have liked it a bit more, because it does do a lot of things well. The graphics are nice, the level design is a great improvement, though Hole-in-One Special still looks better. Music plays during the game, so that's a big plus, and the physics are okay. But the swinging mechanics is messy and hard to understand. Just one simple change could have made the game much better.
It has to be a very tense moment for this young player. A challenging 403-yard par 4. He's stepping up to the tee.
Yeah!
Play hole-in-one golf and win a Callaway putter. Bring the game of golf right into your own living room. Hole-in-one golf from HAL America. See your local dealer for details or contact HAL America at 1-800-468-5354.
Next up is HAL's Hole-in-One Golf, known in Japan as Jumbo Ozaki no Hole-in-One, released in 1991 in Japan and in the US and in 1992 in Europe. A sequel to the Famicom game, it takes the concepts of the original and expands upon it. The gameplay is so much better, actually having an easy to understand icon to show you the power and accuracy much simpler. It's just something to get used to the more you play it. Heck, the game automatically chooses a club for you to get the best results, though you can choose your own club and ignore the recommended one at hand. The game has mode 7 and takes well advantage of that, from the title screen to the introduction of each course, to the ball rolling into the hole. Can you guess which effect has aged the best? The graphics are the best. Well, it is the SNES after all. It's also the first HAL golf game to use more realistic terrain, as there's hills and slopes, and they're easy to view for the most part. You can check the terrain to get a better idea of the course, but I ain't got time for that, I just want to golf. The music is okay, nothing too memorable, but it does sound like Super Nintendo music, as in if you've played many SNES games in your time, this feels like it could be used on nearly most of the games for the console. Kinda disappointed about that. In terms of extras, nearly everything you'd expect from a golf game in terms of features returns, so there you go. Even the match against the computer mode returns as versus HAL, and I don't know if I should be laughing or shit my pants in absolute fear. HAL's Hole-in-One Golf takes everything HAL has done up to this point and made their own swan song of a golf game, as it's the final hole-in-one game they ever did and the final traditional golf game they ever did, and they went out not with a bang but with a birdie. Yeah, we'll go with that. I recommend this one if you're interested. Now with those golf games out of the way, onward to our feature presentation, Kirby's Dream Course, known in Japan as Kirby Bowl. Developed by HAL Laboratory and Nintendo EAD and was published by Nintendo. It was released in 1994 in Japan and in 1995 in the US and Europe. Now here's the thing, this Kirby spin-off wasn't supposed to be a Kirby game at all. In fact, it was supposed to be an original golf game titled Special Tee Shot, which was made by Nintendo. Despite being completed, Nintendo decided not to release it at the time because they didn't think it would be successful in terms of a worldwide release, considering that there were so many other golf games in the market. However, the game would be saved thanks to Nintendo commissioning HAL Laboratory to make a similar game to their own, whilst also working with Nintendo. I guess HAL decided that the only way to make it marketable was to slap Kirby onto it, taking gameplay elements of the original game, and thus, Kirby's Dream Course was born. It would make sense that HAL was commissioned to do this. Like Pinball, they have a history of golf games, most notably their Hole-in-One series that I just reviewed. So, we know they can make this work, right? So this golf game, or what seems to be more crazy golf, is set in an isometric view. You must hit Kirby, the supposed golf ball, at enemies. Hitting the second to last enemy will turn the final enemy into a hole for Kirby to drop into. Hitting enemies give you tomatoes. You have up to 4 tomatoes to use. Every time you hit Kirby without hitting enemies, you lose a tomato. If you run out of tomatoes, you lose a life. You can get power-ups taken from Kirby's Adventure like Tornado, Sparkly Ball, UFO, and many more. There are 8 courses with 8 halls each. You get points for every time you complete a course. You can also get medals for how well you do. Oh, did I tell you this game is hard? I mean, for a Kirby game, trying to be good at this is crazy. You see, you have to angle it, set a power, as in how hard or soft you will hit Kirby and spin, and you have to use all of these in later levels. And once again, the indicator is hard to understand. So much for being a series that's supposed to be an easy to play affair. Well, that is the main games we're talking about though. But what I really hate about this game is that if you lose all your lives, then it's game over. But if you continue, you go back to the beginning of the course you're in. Meaning if you screwed up in the last hole of a course, for example, you have to go back to the first course all over again, and it's annoying considering how difficult it is. Now that is really weird for a series like Kirby. The graphics are the usual vibrant design Kirby is known for, but the backgrounds are so beautiful. The music is pretty good, though it's still recycling most of its music from previous Kirby games, but there are some original tunes too. Some memorable, some background noise. Overall, despite the game being sort of odd in its controls, especially for a golf game, I still liked it. Funny enough, it's sort of like Sonic Spinball, where you take Sonic and put him on a pinball fortress. And it didn't work. Kirby is on a golf course and I like it. It's a decent game, but I wish it was a little fairer or continue from the course you died in, or a save feature. I mean, the game can be a bit long.
The Commodore VIC-20. Welcome to the age of the computer. As you grow with Vic, Vic grows with you. The Vic. The Vic-cessories. Commodore VIC-20, the one to grow on.
It's been a while, HAL. Yep, this is my 3rd video covering all things HAL, and usually Kirby would be the main subject matter. I've tackled their pinball games and even their golf games with their short-lived hole-in-one series. Please check them out after this video. But for now, I want to tackle a subject I don't see many cover. HAL, of course, had a past, and their past is a little misty. In fact, their history is something that was quite hard to find more details of. As some of you know, and I mean those who watch my previous HAL videos, the company didn't start out developing for Nintendo, but for many home computers like the MSX, MSX2, and most particularly the Commodore series of computers like the VIC-20 and the Commodore 64, pretty much working with Commodore to make games for those systems. But what kind of games did they make? Well, other than the pinball and golf games I've already covered, they've made some original titles to say the least. You got the likes of Money Wars, an arcade-style game you must bring a bag of money from one corner to the next, and the lightning projectiles drop faster as you continue your money carrying. You got Poker, which is simply poker. Can't go wrong with that. Slot Machine as a slot machine. Simple as that. There's Potamado Pants, where you catch eggs and toss them into a pipe. There's a ton more games they developed, but that's not what I'm discussing today. I'm talking about their clone games, their rip-offs, their copycats. This was at a time when game developers would copy the most popular arcade titles on the market, whether they got the license to release these clones or not. And usually the Yakuza would be involved too, but that's a possibly dangerous kettle of fish. In short, it was the Wild West of sloppy copyright in video games. And no other game was copied legally and illegally more than Taito's classic and seminal shoot-'em-up Space Invaders. Nihon Busan did it, SNK did it, Midway did it with another version of the game, and HAL has done it, as I'll explain in a bit. If I can't think of another company that did it, that means they're no longer with us. It was a get-rich-quick scheme, and for some, it worked. Many went to arcades to play any kind of Space Invaders, to the point where there were arcades dedicated solely to said very game. That's how big it was. The supply and demand was there for the taking. Until the likes of Pac-Man and Xevious came out and made Space Invaders near obsolete at the time, as far as I'm aware. So to simply put, I'm taking a look at HAL's games that are clones of other classic games. You might be shocked to hear that a beloved company like HAL once plagiarized classic titles, but please watch this all to the end, because there might be more to this than you may assume. But anyway, let's begin. I have a list of these clones ready to talk about that I got from Wikipedia. In fact, that very list was the inspiration for this video. So with that, I'll go in sort of a random order because most of them were released in 1981 anyway, and I mean sort of because there's a few I want to save for last. Oh, and the Commodore VIC-20 was known as VIC 1001 in Japan, so keep that in mind. Though I'll just refer to the machine as the VIC-20 as it rolls off the tongue better, in addition to me showing off more of the VIC-20 versions than the C64 versions, as HAL were more involved in the former versions. No, it's not a game adaptation of the only good movie in the franchise, but a game released in 1981. This game is a clone of 1979's Hyankyo Alien, a maze title not made by a game company, but a group of students of the Theoretical Science Group at the University of Tokyo. It's seen many commercial and even arcade releases, and I say releases because despite getting an official arcade release by the short-lived Denki Yonkyo, HAL wasn't the only company to make their own clone, whether licensed or not. Heck, even Taito, whose Golden Goose at the time got copied more times than I can count, copied Hyankyo Alien. Hopefully they got a license to make said clone, otherwise that's kinda sad. I mean, come on man, those students needed that money for pot noodles. Oh wait, this is Japan. Ramen. From comparing the two versions, the graphics look the same, but the colors and sound effects are different. This is a method many other companies would do back then. Maybe it's to possibly avoid any lawsuits unless a few companies felt rather risky one day. The gameplay is very similar, there's similar enough games with oftentimes unpredictable AI, so it's not too hard to copy. It's not known if HAL got the rights to make this game, but like Taito, I bloody well hope they did. Oh, and whilst I'm here, the Game Boy version of this game fucking sucks. It's downright awful. Don't play this one. Ah, here we go. Just from looking at this one, you know what this is a clone of. But you know what? From looking at the gameplay and for a VIC-20 game, it doesn't look that bad. In fact, it looks good. Gameplay wise, it's not half bad. I'm surprised HAL copied the music beat whenever the aliens take their sidesteps. You could mistake it for a legit port, that's how impressive it is. I'm not sure whether HAL got the rights to this one. I put my money on maybe, since it was released in other countries, particularly in Europe. Who knows? All I know is, we got ourselves a good port. But a clone all the same. The game also got a port in the Commodore 64. It looks the same and I'm assuming it also plays the same. Any issues? I just hate those sound effects and now I have a headache. Jupiter Lander is another VIC-20 title that also got a release on the C64, and is somewhat of a clone of Atari's 1979 classic Lunar Lander. But from what I learned, Lunar Lander is in fact a genre of games loosely based on the landing of the Apollo lunar module on the moon in 1969. Most games consist of controlling a spacecraft as it falls toward the moon or someplace else. You use thrusters to slow down the descent and try and move around horizontally to plant said spacecraft very carefully. It crashes and is destroyed when you hit either obstacles or hitting the ground too hard with too much downward force. There have been many versions of Lunar Lander, from Tranquility Base to IBM's Rocket Lander, there's Lander for Windows 3.1X developed by George Misato, and much more. So you might assume that Jupiter Lander is technically a genre and not a copycat of Lunar Lander. Well, Jupiter Lander has a similar gameplay structure to Lunar Lander, even to where the level zooms in, so you can accurately land slowly. Plus, this is technically a clone of an original game nobody can play anymore. The gameplay is similar, but due to the limitations of the system, the level design is somewhat simplified. It's not going to be a very satisfying port. Kind of a shame after HAL made a near faithful version of Space Invaders on the same system. In terms of music, we do get some jingles, with one at the beginning being ripped from Nichibushi's Moon Cresta. So they took music from the same company that made Space Invader clones. Bloody hell, there was no mercy back then. Road Race is a driving game for the Commodore VIC-20 and 64. This is a clone of Atari's innovative and obscurely influential Night Driver from 1976. The original game has you driving along a road at nighttime. The goal is to avoid crashing into the sides unless you want a bout of epileptic seizures. The arcade original had a steering wheel and a 4-selection gear shift to get that immersive feel for the game. The challenge comes from roads getting narrower and more curvy as you play the game. It's also known for the car design being a plastic insert on the screen instead of a sprite due to hardware limitations. This is something used in a few known arcade titles. Anyone remember Space Invaders Part 2's rainbow plastic insert? The game is a very influential title that has been left in obscurity, with it being the earliest first-person racing games. Though Dr. Reiner First, Nürburgring 1 was the first. But it was Atari's Night Driver that became far popular for the time. I'm learning so much about this game. HAL's Road Race compared to the arcade original is not a bad feat. 5 years of technological advancements and we finally got that car sprite put into the game, while still looking near faithful to the arcade original. Though the speed has unfortunately took a hit, but from what I've seen it plays decently for the system. But is it better than the Atari 2600 port? In the end, it doesn't really matter. The arcade original is so primitive looking that both versions look better by default, but the Atari 2600 port, whilst looking kind of tacky with its colour and graphics, has the speed and smoothness that the VIC-20 port doesn't have. And as for the Commodore 64 port, graphic-wise is an improvement over the VIC-20 port, and its speed does come close to even the 2600 port, but still falling behind a bit. Either way, a nice set of ports that have their strengths and weaknesses. HAL's attempt isn't that bad, but I'm more impressed with the 2600 port for keeping that speed and movement near faithful. Night Driver, a game where its ports impressed me more than the arcade original. How quaint. So it seems I half-assed my work on the pinball video. You see, in that video, I covered Pinball Spectacular on the Commodore 64, a video pinball / breakout hybrid game that's less pinball and more Pong because that was still relevant back in the day. I exclaimed that the game was designed that way due to the limitations of the system. That is incorrect to an extent. What I failed to find out was that this design was copied, but to get a better understanding of this mess, and to make sure I don't screw up like this again, here's Pinball for the Commodore VIC-20 released in 1982, and here's Namco's QDQ from 1979, the second sequel to BG from 1978. Already you can see a similar level design, with the VIC-20 clone being more colourful, but it's far more squished than the arcade original, which had a table-like screen, common in many arcade games for the time. The gameplay is nearly the same as QTQ, even the ghosts are here and accounted for. The blocks don't have the characters drawn on them, possibly due to the limitations of the system. You got the faces in which you can turn their frown upside down as well. Other than the extra text being omitted, it's similar to QTQ. Now on to Pinball Spectacular for the C64. I know I already covered this, but again, this is to set things right if you catch my drift. It seems that the C64 version is a reworked version of the VIC-20 game and HAL reworked it to be less of a clone of QTQ. Though it would end up being very similar to BG's sequel, Bombi. You know, looking back, I'm actually kind of glad I ended up half-assing my coverage of this game a few years back. Now in terms of legality, well, from this moment onwards, and possibly including this game, here's when things are set straight. Radar Rat Race is a clone of Rally X, but here's the weird part. A port of Rally X exists on the VIC-20. You see HAL, albeit Commodore, got the rights from Namco to develop and release some arcade ports to the Commodore VIC-20 onwards, though this deal was exclusive to Japan and Japan alone. Bally Midway from US of A got the rights to release the arcade original and possibly the home console / computer ports, though Rally X was only ported to the MSX, Sharp X1 and Fujitsu FM7, in which no Western publisher had any involvement with save for the MSX port, which was published by Bug-Byte in Europe. It was mostly Japanese ports and most stayed there. But in terms of the VIC-20 port or even the Commodore 64 in the West, HAL ended up changing sprites and the title of the game to avoid any legal issues. So the game is Rally X but replaces the cars with rats, the stationary boulders with black cats, and the flags with cheese. Basically, you try and collect cheese whilst avoiding the other rats. You got the star screen to stop the rats chasing behind you for a short period of time, replacing the smoke screen from the arcade original. As such with these arcade games, the more levels you beat, the harder it gets, with more rats chasing you with higher speeds. The graphics are basic for the system, but it was an early title for the computer, so it's understandable, but it was released for the short-lived Commodore Max machine and a Commodore 64. I feel later ports could have improved upon, well, everything. This is kind of a disappointment. One thing to note is the music, as it's an altered version of Three Blind Mice, and a part of it repeats endlessly to where I feel it gets really annoying. It's an overall fine port of Rally X for the system, but quite difficult even on the first stage to the point of being bullshit. In terms of challenge, it has a lack of balance. Rally X starts relatively easy but gets harder in the process. I may not be too fond of it, but a lot of people who are fans or grew up with the VIC-20 love this game, which is interesting. There's fans of an obscure system. Not like that's a problem, mind you. Star Battle is another VIC-20 game from 1981 and a clone of Namco's Galaxian from 1979, and well, it's a port of Galaxian. You pilot a ship, There are rows of aliens in front of you, with some kamikazing at you because of Japan's repressed memories. And you gotta shoot them all down and do it all over again until you lose all your lives. And this port is the best it can be, given that I've had plenty of years of experience with the original game. In short, it plays well and shooting can... well, it could be better, as the enemy hitboxes are much smaller than those of the arcade original, so you need to get a more direct hit at the aliens. But other than that, it's an alright port of Galaxian, but one I wouldn't come back to play again when the arcade original is easily playable elsewhere. Plus, the Famicom port is much better. Now, this game is a bit special because it was entirely written by the legend himself, Satoru Iwata, who credited himself in the text shown, though hidden as an Easter egg, but with a patch can be restored. Bally Midway also got publishing rights to Galaxian at the time, but unlike Radar Rat Race, who got away with its release in the West, Bally Midway seemingly caught wind of Star Battle and restricted its sales thereafter. Though that's not the end of these kind of controversies when I get to the final game I'll cover. I'm guessing to avoid any more fury from Midway, Commodore made a deal with them to port some of their games to their computers. These included Seawolf, Gorf, and Wizard of War. Now this is the one I saved for last, and for good reason, as it has a very interesting history surrounding it. Jelly Monsters is Pac-Man. Anyone can tell you that in a heartbeat. The graphics are similar, there isn't no rude word spoken, it's just some good old Pac-Man. And whilst the Ghosts have some weird AI that makes the game much harder, though that's probably due to the squash maze compared to the arcade original, it's at least a competent port of Pac-Man. It's alright. And now for its history. Like all the Namco games shown in this video, HAL had the home computer rights to Pac-Man, and so developed the Commodore VIC-20 port, which would be released in 1981. Commodore themselves decided to release it in the West, though all they did was change the name from Pac-Man to Jelly Monsters. Though this is where Atari enters the fray, as they got the rights to release ports of Pac-Man in the US at the time. In fact, Jelly Monsters was released a year before the planned 2600 port that Atari was banking on, and I'm guessing in a sudden case of paranoia and sheer greed, wanted to wipe out any competition who may have made Pac-Man clones via lawsuits, including the game HAL made. A well-known lawsuit involved Atari suing Philips over KC Munchkin, another Pac-Man clone. To summarize, it failed for Atari first time round, but eventually won an appeal the second time round, and Philips had to remove the games off the shelves. Going back to HAL and Commodore, they too were targeted and were taken to court with Atari winning the lawsuit, resulting in Commodore recalling all copies of Jelly Monsters. Now I did find a little tidbit that Atari specifically sued the UK division of Commodore rather than the US division, meaning that it might have been a strategic choice to sue that division. Who knows? But the VIC-20 players weren't at a complete loss, as Atari ended up releasing their own version of Pac-Man on the system in 1983. So was it any good?
Look! 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 What the fuck is this?
Fuck me in the Alps, this is crap. That's the second version of Pac-Man where the supposed clone was better and more faithful than the official release, with Amsterdam's MSX port of Pac-Man being better than the official, and now this. But if it makes you feel any better, Atari rushed the 2600 port to market in order to make more money around the holidays, and the result is a shit port that didn't sell well in addition to making too many copies even for the time, whilst HAL's port was more faithful and had some bloody effort put into it. And now HAL is part of Nintendo, making infamous series like Eggerland, Kirby, Mother, and created the first Super Smash Bros. Game, which has gone on to become Nintendo's most iconic series of party fighters. Whilst Atari is a shed of its former self, being owned by the French and releasing a half-baked console that only Atari fans are gonna fawn over. Now that's a fitting punishment. After the lawsuit, and possibly in a horrid mood, HAL sold the Japanese home computer rights to Denpa, porting the game to many home computers in Japan like the FM7, PC-88, the Sharp MC computers and the Sharp X1, with the PC-6001 port being developed by Microsoft, the PC-98 port being developed by Wiz, and of course Namco themselves developing the MSX port. I told you Jelly Monsters was an interesting topic, but not as interesting as this box art. What the bloody hell is this?
What the fuck is this?
But in such a mad lad move I don't think I've ever seen before in the gaming industry, despite being sued by Atari and having Jelly Monsters being removed from their shelves, Commodore, without the assistance of HAL, went and made a Pac-Man clone of their own called Cosmic Cruncher and released it in 1982 for Canadian players. I'm not kidding, that is one massive fuck off to a bigger company I've ever seen. It's literally Pac-Man, but the ghosts were replaced with aliens, the fruit were replaced with planets, the power pellets were replaced with spaceships, and in yet another power move, they replaced Pac-Man with the Commodore logo. The 80s was one hell of a wild ride, wasn't it? Godspeed, you absolute lunatics. I gotta respect that. That's a company with no more fucks to give. They wanted to release their own Pac-Man clone and they didn't care if they were going to get sued a second time. And strangely enough, they didn't. Probably because Atari by that point were busy trying to fix their reputation over their crappy version of Pac-Man for the 2600. It's a huge mess that we can look back on in sheer frustration, knowing that the modern gaming industry just keeps going downhill, and this history piece was a warning. So that's it for HAL's clone games. For the most part, HAL have been largely innocent when it comes to legalities, with their Namco clones mostly being legal when taking games like Star Battle and Radar Rat Race into account. But I'm not sure about the others, especially Atari's games given the result of the demise of Jelly Monsters. If anything, you can blame Commodore for releasing these games in the West, even at the risk of lawsuits that eventually came to them. But again, they are the epitome of mad lads. At the end of the day, it's an interesting look into video games of the past that not many people think of. HAL wasn't the only company to make clones of dubious legality, but you're probably surprised that they did them in the first place. Nobody ever talks of HAL of the past. They think of HAL who made that pink soft cannibal who likes to eat everything, and that's okay. In fact, you'd be surprised they were ever able to survive in this industry at all, but with hard work and enthusiastic programmers within that small little company in Akihabara, anything was possible. Though all that took to gain success was nearly going bankrupt after a poorly sold Famicom game with a little too much ambition thrown into it, leading to Nintendo saving said company, and of course, the rest is history. But that's for another time. Until then, this video has come to an end, and if you like it, then do what you choose. I'm Froban, and this has been a very interesting topic regarding the company who made Kirby. See you next video.
Nope.